Greetings everyone, and welcome to our Global Leading Voice webinar campaign. It is my pleasure to welcome you all here today on this very exclusive webinar where we will discuss what you should know about the ISO 9001 internal audit process. My name is Erza Ajvazi and I'm the organizer for today's webinar. Please stay tuned for the next 60 minutes and learn more on the benefits of ISO 9001 internal audit, requirements for conducting an ISO 9001 internal audit, and the requirements for developing an internal audit program. To tell us more about it, joining us today is Mr. Gregory Peckford, who is the founder of QCA Online, which is a quality management training and consulting provider, and the author of Mastering ISO 9001-2015, a step-by-step guide to the world's most popular management standard. If you have any questions or comments during the presentation, feel free to write them in the chat box of your control panel, and Mr. Peckford will answer all the questions accordingly. Thank you for your attention, and I hope you will get an insightful information from this webinar. Please, Mr. Peckford, you may start the presentation.
Thank you, Erza, and welcome everyone. I hope everyone can hear me okay. So I just wanted to thank everyone for joining us here today, and I hope you will get some valuable information out of this topic and you can implement it in your work or business. I'll just say off the bat here, please bear with me. I am new to the whole webinar world, but I will try my best to provide clear and relevant information. I'll apologize up front for any background noise you may hear during this webinar. I am working from home and I do have small children in the house, so I can't guarantee you won't hear them in the background at some point throughout the webinar, but at any rate. Before we jump into the internal audit process, I would just like to speak to the importance of the ISO 9001 standard and give a little background as to what it is and the value it can have. It has certainly made a difference in my career and some of the organizations that I've worked for. Not all the organizations I've worked for in the quality field have been ISO certified, but they've definitely, the ISO standard has definitely been a factor in their quality system. Basically, all the quality systems have all been based on ISO 9001. Again, whether they've been certified or not. So it's definitely, one of the most widely used standards out there today. So let me just jump in here and just give you my take on the ISO 9001. Now, this is, again, this is my take, but it's an educated and experienced take on the standard, and I've been working with it for quite some time. So there are over 1 million organizations in over 170 countries registered to ISO 9001. That alone is a pretty impressive statistic claimed by ISO.org. But what this stat is missing are the countless other companies worldwide that have adopted the ISO 9001 standard as a blueprint for developing and implementation of their quality management system without becoming formally certified, which is what I was just mentioning. Like I said, a lot of the companies that I've worked for, even if they haven't been certified, their quality system is based completely on the ISO 9001 standard. The only difference I found there was when I was in the aviation field. A lot of the companies have to follow the like the FAA for the USA and like Transport Canada for Canada. There's pretty stringent guidelines that you have to follow. But still, the ISO 9001 standard was very prevalent in those in all those industries, especially when we went out to suppliers and vendors. You found the ISO 9001 standard was very prevalent. So with so many companies and organizations following this diverse management standard, wouldn't it seem beneficial to incorporate it into your career or business development strategy? Quality management gets a bad rap. the fundamental concepts of process improvement and ensuring customer satisfaction can many times turn into a game of gotcha, and I've seen this many times, with misguided audits turning up endless infractions against procedures that often do not accurately reflect the day-to-day activities of the people performing the work. And it's essentially worth no more than the paper of which they are printed on. We begin to see quality as a necessary evil that is forced upon us, but really serves no purpose to the organization's bottom line. This is a flawed interpretation of a very powerful business management tool. And in this in this webinar, I am going to show you how quality management and the new ISO 9001:2015 standard in particular can help to improve business performance, make you a smarter, more effective professional, and help to elevate your career regardless of the industry in which you work. So what is ISO 9001? First off, for those who are not so familiar, let me give you a little background on the ISO 9001 standard. ISO 9001 is a globally recognized quality management standard that sets out the criteria for organizations, large or small, to set up, implement, and maintain a quality management system. This helps streamline business processes and promote improvement throughout all areas of the organization. Although ISO 9001 has traditionally been viewed as an isolated quality function, I like to think of it as more of a business management standard that focuses on developing processes to improve quality and consistency. Now, I'm not saying that you should march into the office of the CEO waving the latest copy of the ISO 9001 and proclaiming that you should instantly be promoted to manager of business awesomeness. However, if you do decide to take that route, please set your cell phone up to record. I would very much like to hear that conversation. So while ISO 9001 is not a complete standalone business management blueprint, it is a valuable tool that does provide some fundamental management principles that will help to improve the way organizations operate at all levels. Information that could be very valuable to you as a professional in helping the organization to incorporate and manage those principles effectively. Now, like I'm saying here, the ISO standard is a quality standard, but it's very helpful in all aspects of business and in the processes for an organization. So I don't like to focus solely on the quality aspect of it. Now, again, as I said earlier, it's not a standalone business standard, but I mean, it helps throughout the whole organization. And I've seen it many times be very beneficial outside of just the quality realm. So I urge organizations, again, whether they're certified or planning to become certified or not, that they really take in this information that the ISO standard has to offer. I mean, it can really help an organization's bottom line. So I know there's a lot of people out there that don't like when we talk about the ISO standard as more than just a quality standard, but in my experience, it absolutely is. You know, it definitely helps an organization. The ISO 9001:2008 edition was introduced back in 2008 and had been in effect until September 2015. With the latest revision, ISO 9001:2015 was introduced as the latest and greatest. Now, don't get confused by the 2015-2008. That's just the year that they came out, and they'll keep that name, you know, for several years. 7 to 10 years is generally the timeline that they come out. So a lot of people get confused. Oh, it's 2015, so it must already be obsolete, but that's not the case. But again, don't be so quick to turn your back on the 2008 version. The 2008 version will be recognized until September 2018, as organizations are granted this grace period to perform gap analysis and become compliant to the new 2015 standard. So as you can see, each major overhaul of the standard, while undergoing various minor revisions throughout its lifetime, and there are many times you know, that the standard will get updated for various reasons without getting a complete overhaul. But it will remain in effect for a considerable time period. Also, as each subsequent revision builds off of its predecessor, it is never a matter of starting from scratch upon the release of a new edition. So once you learn one standard, it doesn't mean when the next one comes out you have to completely start over. For those who become proficient in the ISO 9001 standard and worry that their knowledge will become obsolete. As I mentioned, ISO 9001 2015 brings with it some new and exciting changes. But one noticeable change, and let me just rehash that, there's a lot of changes to the new revision. So anyone that's familiar with 2008 will definitely notice some major changes to the 2015 revision. So just anyone that's familiar, just note that. And there's a lot of literature and things out there to show you exactly what those changes are. So I'd advise you looking into that for sure. But one noticeable change to the standard that I feel is relevant to this webinar in particular is that the 2015 edition has become much less prescriptive and allows each organization the discretion of determining just how the intent of the standard relates to the nature and operation of their particular scope of business. So what I mean by that is the standard doesn't tell you exactly how you need to do things. It just tells you, it gives you a guideline of the best practices to use in your organization. And it's up to you, it's up to the management of the organization to determine how they're going to implement that and what works best for their scope of work. There's no way that one standard can tell every type of business out there exactly how they have to run. And that's not what ISO 9001 is all about. It's, again, about providing a guideline and letting you as a management team decide what works best for your company. So it's definitely come a long way in terms of being less prescriptive and allowing for organizations to really implement it the way it works best for them. A lot of people aren't crazy about this because they like those more stringent rules, I guess, but I think it's a great addition to the new standard. So it really gives companies a lot of leeway in how they want to implement it. So this allows for greater flexibility for both the application of the standard to all types of organizations, as well as making it much more malleable for those organizations in developing processes that provide maximum value to the specific operation. So again, you can really mold your processes to match exactly what you do. So ISO is not telling you your process has to be laid out in a certain manner. It's however it works best for you and your organization. So you really have the freedom to. So what does all this mean for those of us who are looking to improve performance in our organizations or individual departments, and who would like to add valuable knowledge to our professional toolkit and create career opportunities for your own professional growth? The increased discretion afforded to each organization in determining exactly what processes will be required, as well as the complexity of those processes, is based on comprehensive review and determination of its internal and external context. As a result, organizations may find it difficult to accurately interpret the standard and make determinations without the assistance of individuals who have a sound understanding of the concepts and intent of each clause of the ISO 9001 standard, as well as how each new clause applies to the organization. This will invariably result in the increased consultancy or quality management representation required by organizations to ensure they make the appropriate provisions for the initial incorporation or transition to the new ISO 9001 2015 requirements, and continue to maintain this conformity to the latest revision of the standard. So who best to provide that expertise than you? So basically what I say is be one that the organizations turn to for the help that they will surely need, because there's going to be a lot of, again, like I said, there's a lot of change between the 2008 and the 2015 revision. So a lot of companies might have difficulty making that transition and understanding it. So being a quality professional that understands the 2015 requirements can be a real benefit to a lot of organizations. The benefits of understanding and becoming proficient in ISO 9001 standard are not limited to quality management professionals alone. The concepts and guidelines laid out in the standard are valuable to any organization or individual looking to grow their understanding or of managing effective business processes? Would it not be beneficial to be in a position to offer valuable insights on how to improve your organization's processes, even from a departmental level? And this goes back to what I was saying, that I believe the ISO 9001 standard is a little more than just a quality standard. It can help, like, you don't have to be a quality professional. It can help in any area of the business and in your career. It can make you a smarter manager. It can really help you identify areas that need to be improved in the organization. You don't have to be developing or implementing a full-blown quality management system with the goal of obtaining certification to the ISO 9001 standard, but you could certainly use that knowledge to improve on the processes that relate to your role within the organization, both directly and indirectly. Business improvement and enhanced customer satisfaction, regardless of whether those customers be internal departments that rely on your particular output or external customers, are not isolated quality management functions, but the responsibility of all personnel within the organization. And that's another thing too, making sure that everybody in the organization understands their role in terms of quality and where the ISO 9001 standard comes into play. Is important to get buy-in from everybody and really take the maximum benefit from the standard. Learning and becoming proficient in the ISO 9001 family of standards, or ISO 9000 family of standards rather, has been one of the most impactful factors in my career progression to date and continues to be a driving factor in my success as well as the success of the organizations I've worked for. ISO 9001 is designed as a generic standard that is meant to apply to any type of organization regardless of the industry or field of operation. This diversity has been made even more apparent with the latest 2015 edition of the standard. I myself have transitioned from multiple industries, and you can see on the slide here that I have up right now, that I first started in aviation, and I've transitioned to many industries from there. So like I said, I myself have transitioned from multiple industries, from aerospace to oil and energy, engineering to field construction. So I can say with experience that the concepts of the ISO 9001 standard are relevant and commonplace in all situations. The process is a process in any business sense. A process is a process in any business sense, and continuous improvement is essential in the success of any organization. For me personally, learning and becoming proficient in the ISO 9001 standard has been profound on my ability to advance my career and traverse through multiple industries and professional disciplines, while helping organizations improve quality, business, and operational performance. I'm certain that the same results can be accomplished by anyone incorporating this valuable management standard into their professional credentials. So I'll get more into the slides here now. Like I said, I just wanted to give you some background on the ISO 9001 standard and how it's helped myself and the organizations that I've worked for, because it is a great benefit. So a little bit about me here now. Like I said, my name is Greg Peckford. I started my career as an avionics engineer. You can see in this picture here, this was taken quite a few years ago, back when I actually had hair. But I was working in Mexico in this picture, and this airplane did a little bit of a belly landing, so we completely overhauled the aircraft. But I put this picture up just to kind of show you the progression that my career has taken, from a technical aspect, and then moving more into a management position that I'm in now, and that was all due to quality management and ISO 9001. So it's really been a changing factor in my career for sure. Like I said, I'm a former avionics engineer. I worked at that for many, many years. It was great because I had the fortune to travel to many countries, repairing and modifying aircraft of all kinds, big and small. So it was a great career choice for me. I've worked for major airlines here in Calgary, where I got my start in quality, actually in quality control and then quality assurance. I was performing audits on vendors and suppliers. all throughout North America for the airline that I worked for. So really going into companies and finding out how they worked and how they established their processes, and I mean, it was just an amazing learning experience for me throughout my career. I've worked as a quality manager for engineering firms since aviation, engineering firms, major construction in oil and gas, and other industries as well. I'm an entrepreneur, and I've recently published my book, Mastering ISO 9001 2015, a step-by-step guide to the world's most popular management standard. Shameless plug. And now I'm also founder of QCA Online, where I offer quality management and ISO 9001 based training, online training, along with my book and those sorts of things, and also online consulting. I'm a father of 3 and a husband. So I just want to quickly let you know what it is I offer. Again, my website is qcaonline.com. On there you can find my blog, where I regularly add articles and blog posts and just information about not just ISO 9001 but quality management in general. So it's a good resource for anyone that's looking for information on that subject. By all means, you can come over there. You can ask me questions. I have a contact form on there. You can send me a question. I'd be happy to help out if I can. Always happy to hear from new people and learn what's going on in the industries out there. So again, on the website, I have my book and then my training program. Right now you can get the book along with the training program all in one bundle, and I have it split up so that an individual quality management professional or someone that wanted to get into quality management, there's a program for them, and there's also a program for organizations that want to do a more wide range of training throughout their personnel. Again, this is all online training. This is not in classroom based training. So come check us out. So let's get into what we will learn in terms of the ISO 9001 audit function. And let's take a look at some of the benefits of the let's look at what we will learn throughout the webinar here first. So we'll touch on, next coming up here, we'll touch on the benefits of the ISO 9001 internal audit. And again, there's many benefits, but I'll hit a few major points that I feel are important. Excuse me one second. We'll talk about the requirements for conducting an ISO 9001 internal audit. And now there's internal audits that are not necessarily based on ISO 9001, of course, but for the sake of this webinar, we'll focus more on the requirements that the standard have laid out for the internal audit process. And a lot of this information that I'm giving you here right now is all included in the training program. So, there's definitely a lot of great information here. We'll also look at the requirements for developing an internal audit program. So what requirements are expected of an organization following the ISO 9001 standard for developing their audit program, and kind of what they need in there. So we'll go through a lot of that in the last half of the webinar. So let's take a look at some of the benefits of the internal audit process and why organizations should take advantage of this extremely valuable tool. Here we go. So obviously one of the most valuable benefits of the internal audit is identifying gaps, deficiencies, and costly waste. Once process gaps have been identified, they can be filled, deficiencies rectified. The only way to effectively determine this is by stepping back and taking an honest and unbiased look at how things are done and where we can improve. Reducing waste is essential to an organization's bottom line and its ultimate success. The internal audit provides an extremely effective way of identifying the areas producing waste, allowing for corrective action to be implemented. So, I mean, you really want to take a good hard look at the company and see where do we have gaps, where are deficiencies present, and where's the waste coming from? Where can we reduce this waste? And the internal audit process is an ideal way to do this. Bear with me here. So this goes without saying that identifying and correcting gaps and reducing waste improve the overall performance of the organization. The internal audit process is highly effective at identifying areas that could be improved upon. They may not necessarily be gaping cracks in the process, but even the most minimal of improvements are worth making. I find one of the best tools in the auditing tool belt is the observation for improvement. And these are areas that may not warrant a non-conformance or may not require immediate action, but if left unactioned could cause issues down the line or may offer a more effective approach. So, you know, the areas of improvement, when you're conducting an audit and you see something that, you know what, it's not a real issue right now, but I could see that becoming a problem down the line if things aren't tightened up, so to speak. So when you make these observations for improvement on an audit report, it really gives the auditee or the management group a tool to follow and see, you know, things that they might not have been able to see from their perspective. So the improvement opportunities are endless when it comes to the audit, the internal audit. One area I found most organizations to be deficient in is the identification and sharing of lessons learned. I don't know why this is such a big issue for a lot of organizations, but it just seems like many organizations that I've seen, whether it's organizations I've worked for or organizations I've went into to perform audits, the lessons learned for some reason is an area that it just doesn't get covered as well as it should. And it's not difficult. I mean, it's a matter of tracking your deficiencies and you know, areas of improvement and non-conformances and sharing that with you know, with the rest of the organization. If gaps or deficiencies are identified, wouldn't it seem beneficial to share this information with other parties or departments within the organization so that similar issues do not arise or that the same issue does not get repeated? This is not a difficult task to track and implement, but is highly overlooked in my experience. Communication is key here, and the internal audit is a great method of identifying such lessons. So yeah, you really, when you're performing the internal audit, you really come across areas of improvement or non-conformances and things like that. I mean, track them and share them with everybody within the organization. Make sure it's communicated adequately so that people aren't going to make these same mistakes over again. You know, there's nothing more costly than an organization that continues to make the same mistake over and over again. So it's really effective at identifying that, and then again, you have to make sure, you have to take the steps to communicate those areas. This next benefit lends itself to the previous point on lessons learned, but I think it deserves mentioning. The internal audit provides a method of communication within cross-functional departments. Sorry, here we go. When you look at the multiple departments or areas within an organization, you have the benefit of recognizing patterns or effective practices in one area may work well in others. Internal audit is a great tool for identifying and sharing such benefits. So when you're auditing, many times you're not just auditing one area or functional department within an organization. You might audit. I know when I was working, when in doing audits, you go into all different areas, and you really learn what works in one, and that can lend itself to work in another department. So it's really important that you use the internal audit as ways to communicate these areas that can improve in other areas, in other departments. So I really felt that was, like I said, it kind of goes with the lesson learned, but I really feel it deserves its place on its own here. Another fundamental benefit of the internal audit is the extremely valuable feedback gathered from employees and management personnel who might never have shared this information otherwise. When you have a productive and open conversation with auditees, they will many times provide you with feedback that, if managed effectively, can be a goldmine of real-time actionable insights into the health and culture of the organization. Many organizations will probe their clients and customers for information on how they are performing, but will overlook the highly valuable feedback from within. So what's going on, what's going on within your own organization? What are your employees and your management personnel saying? Their feedback is vital to the success of an organization. And, a lot of times organizations can fall short on that, and it's really something important that they should really pay attention to. Another overlooked benefit of the internal audit process is the opportunity for training and learning. This comes with little to no budget or cost to the organization other than the time spent during the audit. Allowing employees to participate in audits as observers can provide extremely effective training opportunities. They get to see some of the reasons why things are done the way they are. They learn that each step of a process or a procedure has an effect on the other processes. They can learn other skills and how things are done in other areas of the organization. And that lends back to my last point about employee feedback and things like that. When I started auditing, I was amazed at how much valuable information I was picking up simply by listening and taking in all the information that was being provided. I'm not an HR or a finance professional, but I now understand the inner workings of these departments. I would never have acquired this information without performing internal audits. So it's very valuable. It's a very valuable learning tool. If you can take, they don't have to be in the quality department or be auditors. It's sometimes good to get a different perspective in the audit. So it can actually be very beneficial to the audit itself with that extra perspective. So this one point has been a major part of my career success to date. Absolutely. I mean, it's been truly beneficial to my career, performing audits and being an observer on audits. Okay. So, internal audit. It's such a vital part of maintaining a functional and effective quality management system. And although we could go into great detail on the many intricate facets of the internal audit process, we will stick to the specific requirements as stated by the ISO 9001 standard for the purposes of this webinar. And like I was saying earlier, not every internal audit, of course, is based on the ISO 9001 standard, but you'll find, these requirements and standards are very, very common throughout any quality system. And audit process. So, but anyway, for the purpose of this webinar, we're going to stick to what the ISO 9001 standard requires for the internal audit process. According to ISO 9000, the fundamentals and vocabulary standard, an audit is a systematic, independent, and documented process for obtaining audit evidence and evaluating it objectively to determine the extent to which audit criteria are fulfilled. Now, the fundamentals and vocabulary standard, the ISO 9000, that's basically what it says. It gives you the definitions that are used of many of the wording that's used in the ISO standard. So it's definitely a complementary tool to the ISO 9001 standard, and anyone performing audits should have this within their arsenal for sure. In other words, making sure that what is happening in practice aligns with policies, processes, and procedures. Audits should be carried out to look for areas for improvement and best practices. Internal audits should not be adversarial or confrontational. Now, this is a big point here. Too many auditors have the misconception that they are there to find fault and only focus on the negative aspects of the audit process. I have experienced auditors who have the mindset that they have to find the nonconformance and will press until they do. Some will even consider their job complete once they do. So basically, once they find an issue, hey, I'm done. No need to look any further. I have what I came for. That's not to say that the nonconformance is a bad thing. A nonconformance or a corrective action should be viewed as a tool. A method of recording areas that require attention, ensuring that they get corrected and that lessons can be learned to ensure they are not repeated. I'm pretty certain you will agree that this is not a very constructive tactic and certainly does not add value when an auditor is basically going in there just looking for issues. You know, that's definitely not the course of action that I would like to take on my audits, for sure. It's unfortunate that so many people see the audit as a negative process, similar to getting a speeding ticket. Believe it or not, I actually worked for an organization that called it a speeding ticket when they got written up for a quality or paperwork infraction. So it kind of sends a bad message and puts a negative connotation on the whole process. It's not the best approach in my view. People feel the auditor is there to police them and find fault in what they do. People take pride in their work and certainly don't appreciate an outsider coming in and telling them how to do their job or that they are not doing it correctly. That's why as an auditor we must make it clear that we are there to help and provide a cold eye view of the process to determine if there are areas that can be improved upon. How can we work together to make things better? This is especially important in an internal audit, as most times you are auditing your peers and coworkers. You're all there for a common goal, to effectively do the job you were hired to do and ultimately see success in the organization as a whole. I mean, everyone's there for that same reason. If the organization is prosperous, then obviously you as an individual are prosperous as well. Along with that, we should not overlook the areas that are performing well. This is very important to a successful audit. When you see areas where a process is being implemented effectively or someone is doing their job exceptionally well, you should record it. And it should definitely be pointed out. I mean, we're not just going in there looking for issues. We're looking for, you know, what's going well, what can be improved upon. So, I mean, this goes a long way to improving the perception of the audit and it'll help you get buy-in from the auditee. You'll be amazed how far this can go to improve people's willingness to cooperate and be less reluctant to hold back important information. I really can't stress this point enough, as I believe it's vital to the success of an internal audit process within an organization. Excuse me. So internal audits should be formal, they should be planned, and they should be organized. Remember, you're taking time away from regular duties and activities. People are busy, and we should not waste their valuable time by being unprepared and unorganized. I mean, this is, again, I can't stress this enough. I mean, you have to be prepared going into an audit. You have to have everything planned out. Who are you going to interview? You know, what areas are you going to look at? Now, when I say that, it has to be organized and planned, but you also have to be fluid, and you have to be able to adjust on the fly, because sometimes you might not be able to get into a certain department at a certain time. Someone might be tied up that you were supposed to interview at a certain time, so you have to be flexible with that. But you definitely want to be organized when you go in there and make sure that you're coming off professional, and that'll just make the audit go much smoother. It creates less negativity and less confrontation, for sure. So definitely some good points there. They are conducted in an impartial and objective manner. Objectivity is a crucial aspect of the internal audit process. So, I mean, definitely we have to be very impartial and very objective, you know, when we go into an audit, and not let our own judgments and feelings cloud, you know, what we're seeing and the facts. Audits should follow an agreed scope and procedures. So this is part of the planning. What exactly are you going to audit? What's included in the audit? What areas are going to be covered? So you definitely want to have a defined scope and make sure that the auditee understands that scope and knows exactly what it is you're going to go in to look at. This helps them be prepared, but plus it puts them at ease so they know exactly what you're going to look at. Not exactly what you're going to look at, but they have a roundabout idea of the areas you're going to look at. So it just makes everything flow much smoother. Audits are used to gather facts and determine the degree to which requirements are being met. As well as meeting the conformity requirements of ISO 9001, there is a lot of value to be added to an organization by making use of internal audits to gather other valuable information during the audit process. So much can be learned about the overall performance of an organization by simply communicating with people on other issues and ideas. The key is to not simply limit internal audits to conformity issues alone. And this goes back to what I was saying, that make sure you point out areas that you see are performing well, and when people are doing a good job, make sure that you let them know it. I think that goes a long way in conducting a successful audit, and like I said, getting buy-in from the auditees. So there is a standard for management systems auditing within the ISO 9000 family. It's ISO 19011. Organizations contemplating or conducting audits should obtain this invaluable standard. So it's a separate standard to the ISO 9001 document. I should say it's a separate document, and it provides guidance on auditing management systems, including the principles of auditing, managing an audit program, and conducting management system audits. So it's a great tool. I'm not going into it here now, but I just want to make everybody aware of it. I don't know that how aware people are of it, but again, it's 19,011. The latest version is 2011. And I mean, it's a goldmine of information for conducting internal audits based on the ISO 9001 standard. So definitely pick up a copy of this. You won't regret it. It's definitely a helpful tool. There's a lot of information in there. So yeah, like I said, it's been very beneficial for me, for sure. So I would definitely recommend that you pick it up. So section 9.2 of the standard states that organizations must conduct internal audits at planned intervals. So what does the standard mean by planned intervals? You will notice that there is no actual timeline given. That is because ISO 9001 does not dictate how often an organization is required to audit its own QMS. It's up to the organization to determine how often they will conduct internal audits on its own processes. It is, however, commonly accepted that those intervals be within a 6-month to annual interval. And in fact, if an organization is registered to the ISO 9001 standard, the certifying registrar or certification authority will likely require a minimum of yearly internal audits as part of its certification acceptance criteria. In order to manage this requirement, organizations can implement an audit schedule outlining the planned audit intervals, including proposed dates and departments or processes to be audited. The purpose of an internal audit program or schedule is to plan the type and number of audits, as well as to identify and provide the necessary resources to conduct them. It's also important to note that it's not required to do a complete system audit in one shot. It's perfectly acceptable for the organization to segment or break up the audit process and plan for the particular processes to be audited at specified times, which can be outlined in the audit schedule. By doing this, you alleviate some of the resources needed, as well as the time and disruptions to regular activities. Let's up here. So the whole point of the internal audit process is to provide information on whether the quality management system conforms to the organization's own requirements for its quality management system, and that it also conforms to the requirements of the ISO 9001:2015 standard. Now, for the sake of maintaining certification to the ISO 9001 standard, the benefit from the valuable concepts and frameworks it provides, it's vital that the organization perform internal audits to ensure it is in conformance of the requirements laid out in the standard. This is pretty straightforward and required as part of the certification process. But most importantly, the organization must ensure that it is conforming to the requirements that it has set out for itself. These are the requirements that the organization has painstakingly established in order to produce the products and services it offers its customers, and is how it maintains a level of customer satisfaction. This is by far the most important set of requirements to maintain conformity to. Without this, the organization does not stand a chance of being successful. It all goes back to what do you do, or do what you say and say what you do. The auditor must review an organization's documentation to see what processes it has established. What steps have they determined vital to producing products and services that conform to client requirements? Once the auditor has an understanding of such processes, it's then time to determine if the organization is following those processes and effectively, everyone is within the organization is aware of their specific role in regards to that process. So basically, obviously, if you're going to be certified to the ISO 9001 standard, or even if you're just simply following the ISO 9001 standard, you need to audit against that standard and make sure we're going to get the most value out of the internal audit process. Along with management review, internal audit of the organization's quality management system is an essential process for providing confidence in the effective implementation and maintenance of the QMS. Internal audits provide the organization with insights into the adequacy of its processes and documentation, conformance to requirements, how well they are operating, and where the improvements are needed most. Is the organization following in practice what they have implemented in process or procedure? Are objectives being achieved? Is there a satisfactory level of customer satisfaction? Are there ongoing efforts to identify continuous improvement opportunities, and are actions being taken to realize these opportunities? Switch slides here. Oh, there we go. So now we'll get into the internal audit program. This is the last section in this webinar. So just jump in here. So now that we know why we must perform internal audits, Section 9.2.2 of the standard discusses exactly what must be done in order to accomplish this effectively. This section states that organizations must plan, establish, implement, and maintain an audit program. This program must include the frequency of audits, how often and at what intervals will audits be performed, what methods or how will audits be conducted, who is responsible for the audit program, and what requirements must be considered while planning for the audit program. Also, how will the results of the internal audits be reported? You will notice that the standard does not state that the documented information be maintained, or in other words, that the procedures be written for the audit program. Again, this is left to the discretion of the organization. However, it would be extremely difficult, I would say if not impossible, to maintain an effective audit program that truly adds value and drives continuous improvement efforts without having a documented process for this extremely important function. When developing the audit program, or more accurately in this regard, the audit schedule, the organization must also take into consideration such factors as the importance of the process being audited, Some processes carry more weight than others simply because they can have a greater effect on the success of the organization or conformity of products and services to requirements. That's not to say that only look at these processes and forget about all others. It's just that the frequency of audits will likely be greater for some processes than others, depending on the importance of the processes to the organization's overall operation. Another consideration when determining the audit program are changes which may have an effect on the organization. Whenever there's an aspect of the organization's operation that changes frequently or has undergone a major change, it's important to capture this in the audit program to make sure that the changes are not only effective, but have not had a negative effect on the process being changed, as well as on other constituent processes. Have the effects of the changes been adequately controlled, and have there been any unforeseen circumstances that must be addressed? And of course, one of the major considerations which must be factored into the audit program, and unfortunately is often overlooked, are the results from previous audits. This does not have to be limited to internal audits performed by the organization, but also audits performed by outside parties, such as customers and certification audits. If an area has been shown to have deficiencies in the past, you will likely want to audit these areas a little more frequently than other areas that have been performing well with no findings. The organization will also do well to schedule follow-up audits for areas that have had issues in the past and in past audits to ensure that corrective actions have been implemented effectively. Along with what we have already discussed in this webinar, there are other factors besides the frequency of audit scheduling that must be considered when planning and conducting an internal audit. A key consideration, of course, is the audit criteria and scope of each audit. What exactly are you auditing against, and what are the boundaries of the audit? Audit criteria, according to ISO 19011, Guidelines for Auditing Management Systems, is a set of policies, procedures, and requirements used as a reference against which audit evidence is compared. So obviously, we have to know exactly what policies, procedures, and requirements are applicable to the scope of that audit. The audit scope generally includes the physical locations, organizational units, activities, and processes, as well as time period covered in the audit. Both the audit criteria and the scope would typically be defined within the audit plan, developed and distributed prior to commencing the audit activities, so that everyone involved is aware and on the same page with the process and what their individual roles are. Selecting and assigning auditors to conduct the actual audit is a very important consideration. It's important to note that audits can be performed by any individual within the organization as long as they have been adequately trained on the process. Internal audits do not have to be performed by ISO certified auditors. What's most important is that the auditor possess the competence needed to achieve the audit objectives and that a level of impartiality and objectivity are maintained. This, of course, means that you would not assign an individual to audit his or her own department, or that is known to have a close personal relationship or a conflict with the auditee. The findings must be based on facts and observations and backed up with impartial evidence. Having multiple personnel within various departments or work functions trained and competent in the audit process available when necessary would be a good way for the organization to meet this requirement. The audit process is meaningless unless the results of the audit are communicated or reported to the relevant management personnel who can take the necessary steps to improve the system and the organization's operations as a whole. It is vital and now a requirement of the ISO 9001:2015 standard that management be aware and play a leading role in the health of the QMS. Results from the audit process provide the best indication of how well the system is performing and what areas need additional attention. In fact, audit reports are one of the necessary inputs required in the management review process. Departmental managers must be aware of the audit results so that any findings that arise in their particular areas can be dealt with directly and effectively. Another requirement of the organization with respect to its audit process is to ensure that appropriate correction and corrective action are taken in a timely manner. When nonconformances are noted during the audit process, there must be adequate corrective actions taken in order to fix the immediate issue, as well as address the root cause in order to prevent it from reoccurring. ISO states that the corrective actions must be carried out without undue delay. This does not give a specific timeline for corrective action. This is because all corrective actions are different, and some will require more time to complete than others, depending on the complexity of the issue and the steps required to correct it. If the corrective action is relatively simple to complete, then it should be done as soon as practical, after the audit report has been released. If it requires an ongoing process for effective corrective action, an action plan should be developed to show the progress and steps being taken that will lead to the eventual corrective action or correction of the issue. And the last point here, the requirement to be considered is the retention of documented information as evidence of the implementation of the audit program and audit results. Keep in mind, retention means records. What has been done? What has been identified, both positive and negative, during the audit process? Also keep in mind, audit reports and results are a key input to the management review process, so it's essential that adequate records be kept in for review. Plus, it's extremely important that records of corrective action be kept so that assessments can be made as to the effectiveness of those actions, as well as show evidence that corrective actions have been identified and implemented should the issue reoccur in future audits. One of the main areas an auditor should look for when performing an internal audit is the results from previous audits and the actions taken to correct nonconformities. Without adequate record keeping, this would be impossible to manage. So that's all I have in terms of the ISO 9001 internal audit process. I hope you found this information very valuable. There's so much more to the internal audit process that we just can't simply cover in an hour-long webinar. But like I said, there's just so much information within the standard, and the guideline, the 19,011 guideline, is an incredibly valuable tool. So I would recommend you pick it up, and there's so much to learn, and it'll definitely help you out in your internal audits for sure. Again, I hope you found this information valuable. If you like this webinar, you'll love the Mastering ISO 9001 2015 online training program, which you can find on QCA Online. Again, it's an online training program. And it's great for the individual, or even you know, for organizational training. So we have a program for each over there. This is just a small taste of what you'll find inside that program. So it's packed full of extremely valuable information, just like you got here today. So head over to qcaonline.com and check it out. Erza, with that said, I'll hand it back over to you.
Thank you, Gregory. I would like to thank you for this very informative and pleasant presentation. It was an honor to have you as a presenter. I would also like to inform you and all the all the attendees that PCB provides training and certification services for ISO 9001 Introduction, Foundation, Lead Implementer, Lead Auditor, and ISO 9001 2015 Transition. A PCB certificate will demonstrate your dedication in implementing and managing these processes and frameworks, and most importantly, you will be recognized worldwide. For more information, please visit our website, pcb.com/training. Now, without further ado, we will read some of the questions from attendees regarding today's presentation. Okay, one of the attendees asked the following question. How come organizations will comply to internal and external contact, and how will it be audited in internal audits?
Sorry, could you just repeat that again, please?
Okay, how come organizations will comply to internal and external contacts, and how will it be audited in internal audits?
I'm not quite sure I understand the question, but if I understand correctly, they're asking how can you be sure that the organization is going to comply with the internal audit process. I mean, that's all part of the organizational culture and how the management how they reflect the internal audit and the importance of it. I mean, if the management does not show solidarity and the importance of the quality management system and the audit process, I mean, how can you expect the from lower levels to take it seriously as well? So I think that's the answer to that question is management involvement and accountability for your own department and your own area of work. So it definitely trickles down from management, and the new ISO 9001 2015 standard is very big on management involvement in the quality management system. So if I understood that question correctly, definitely management involvement and accountability is definitely the way to make sure that the audit process, the internal audit process, is taken seriously and that everybody's on board.
Okay, thank you, Greg. I will continue with other questions. One of the question is that an attendee said, you mentioned the importance of a gap analysis to be performed to focus the audit effort. What's your take on how the risk management and audit function work together? Can they be separated?
Oh, absolutely, they can be separate. Now, when I mentioned gap analysis earlier, that was more in regards to gaps between. So if you already have a quality management function in place, then you want to know, look, and you're going to the new 2015 revision, you want to know where those gaps are in your conformity to the new standard. You definitely want to perform a gap analysis and find out where you're deficient in terms of the new standard. Now, again, you could use gap analysis to find out any gaps in your system, just to make sure that you're covering all your bases. Now, in terms of risk analysis, that's kind of a whole nother ball game. Risk analysis can be very in-depth, and now that ISO includes risk-based thinking, I don't believe that the ISO 9001 standard covers risk in terms of a full-blown risk analysis program. So I urge people not to get confused in the whole risk-based thinking that's included in the ISO 9001 2015 version of the standard. It's more about when you're developing your processes and things like that, that you consider the risks. What are the possible effects that this process can have on another process, or on your outside parties. So what risks by implementing this process, what risks are being inherently brought into the system, and just make sure you're aware of those risks when you're developing your processes. A risk analysis is a very like you're sitting down with management and you're going through all the possible risks throughout the organization. I mean, you're not just looking at quality risks, you're looking at financial risks, you're looking at health and safety risks, so I definitely would say the gap analysis and a risk assessment are two separate entities, and you really want to have a good, robust risk analysis process, which unfortunately a lot of companies don't have, but I think it's getting more and more prevalent in organizations. So I hope that kind of answers the question.
The next question is, my understanding is that from ISO 9001-2008 to 2015 revision, that there are no changes in the requirements to the internal audit process. Do you agree?
There are there's not a whole lot of change to the internal audit process. I mean, there are different areas that you're going to be looking for different things. There's, the standard is more descriptive on paying more attention to your external parties, so your vendors and anyone outside of the organization that that can have an effect on the organization, or that the organization can have effect on. So when you're doing your internal audits, obviously you want to keep that sort of thing in. You want to take into consideration those sorts of things, but the processes for internal audit, yes, I agree, they have not changed considerably for the 2015 version. Basically, the requirements for the internal audit, they have not changed much from the 2008 version.
Thank you for your answers, Mr. Peckford. I will continue with some of the questions. One of them is, can non-documentation of an internal audit procedure be regarded as a non-conformity by a third-party auditor in the ISO 9001-2015 transition audit?
It does state that you must keep records of your audit process. Now, it doesn't say that you have to have a written procedure for your audits, but you definitely have to take records for the audit process, for your internal audits. One of the reasons I mentioned in the webinar was if you look at your management review process and the requirements for management review in the 2015 version of the standard, the audit results of internal audits are one of the inputs, one of the required inputs for the management review. So without those records, I mean, there's no way to bring that into the management review process. So that's one area definitely. If you go to the standard and look at the management review, you'll see that audits are internal audits. The results of internal audits are an input, a required input. So yeah, if you don't have any records of any of your internal audits, I mean, how can you show, for one, how can you show that you're doing them? And again, how can you show that you're acting on the results of those audits? So and dealing with your corrective actions and nonconformities and things like that. So yes, I think for sure you could get a nonconformance for that.
Thank you for providing us with such informative answers. Another question is, any guidelines on sampling during audits?
There are guidelines out there. There's nothing spelled out in the ISO 9001 standard in terms of sampling, but there are definitely guidelines out there that you could use. There are sampling generators that you can get. I know even just doing, I forget now I can't come up with it right now, but there is a very good one that you can get online that you basically type in your sample size and it'll give you your the sampling numbers in terms of so part sampling, things like that, or interviews, how many personnel there are in a specific department and how many interviews you should conduct. But again, now the ISO 9001 standard doesn't spell that out, but there are definitely tools that you can get that are readily available for sample sizes for sure.
All right, due to the time limitation, I will only read one more question, and for the remaining questions, please be informed that our presenter will answer them directly to your email addresses privately. Okay, so the last question is, can non-conformances be issued before the audit report is completed?
They can be, yes. Generally, they wouldn't be. Generally, that would all come as part of the audit report in in my experience, that's how I would normally do it. For sure, when you do determine that there is a nonconformance, that you let the auditee know right away. This is not something you want to sit on and spring up in the the closing meeting, or when they get the audit report, they see that there's a nonconformance. When you find a nonconformance, you should definitely let them know right away. And I mean, some of the things can be fixed rather quickly. I've had issues that have been corrected on the spot. Again, now that's up to you whether you continue to write that up or not, but definitely you want to make sure that the auditee, communication is key. So you want to make sure that the auditee is aware of any issues that you find. You definitely don't want to spring this stuff on them later. So formally written up, not necessarily, but you definitely want to make them aware of it before the audit report comes out.
Okay, thank you very much. I would like to thank you once again for this very informative presentation, Mr. Peckford. It was truly an honor to have you as our presenter today. I would also like
Thank
to
you very
thank
much.
I would also like to thank all the attendees for taking the time out of their busy schedules to join us. Please be reminded that this webinar will be recorded and posted on our YouTube channel as well as the PowerPoint slides. We really hope that you enjoyed our webinar and we wish you a wonderful day. Thank you again, Mr. Peckford.
Thank you.